The clock had just struck 9 in the evening when Elena pushed her cleaning cart through the heavy wooden doors of the Rothschild Conservatory. Her shoulders ached from her earlier shift at the hospital, and she still had the office building to clean after this. But she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. The conservatory was one of those places that made you feel small just by walking through it. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed to touch the sky. The walls were covered in portraits of famous composers, all of them looking down with serious faces as if judging everyone who passed by. Thick red carpets muffled her footsteps as she made her way down the corridor toward the grand concert hall. This was Elena's favorite job of the 3 she worked, even though it paid the least. Not because the work was easier, not because the people were kinder, but because of what lived inside that concert hall. The piano. It wasn't just any piano. It was a Steinway grand piano, the kind that cost more than Elena would make in 10 years. Its black surface gleamed under the stage lights like still water at midnight. Every night when she cleaned the hall, she would stop and stare at it for a moment. Just a moment. Never longer. She had floors to mop and windows to wipe and trash to collect, but tonight felt different somehow. Elena pulled out her mop and bucket, filling it with soapy water from the utility closet. The smell of lemon cleaner filled her nose as she began working on the marble floors near the entrance. Her hands moved automatically, the way they always did after 2 years of doing the same routine. Dip them up. Wring it out. Sweep it across the floor in steady strokes. Move backward, repeat. Her mind wandered as she worked. She thought about her mother, who was getting weaker every week. The medical bills kept piling up on their kitchen table like unwanted guests who refused to leave. She thought about her younger brother, who had to share a bedroom with her in their tiny 2-room apartment because that's all they could afford. He was smart, that kid. He deserved better than hand-me-down textbooks and shoes with holes in them. That's why Elena worked 3 jobs. That's why she cleaned floors until her back screamed and her hands cracked and bled. That's why she swallowed her pride every single day and scrubbed toilets used by teenagers who wore shoes that cost more than her monthly rent. She was halfway across the hall when she heard voices. Male voices echoing from somewhere near the back of the building. Elena froze. Usually everyone was gone by now. The students left by 6, the teachers by 7. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:15. The voices grew louder, coming closer. Elena recognized one of them immediately. Everyone who worked at the conservatory knew that voice. Sharp, commanding, used to being obeyed without question. Maestro Victor Blackwood. He swept into the concert hall like a storm cloud, all dramatic gestures and flowing black coat. 2 young students trailed behind him, a boy and a girl, both clutching folders of sheet music against their chests. They looked tired, annoyed, like they'd rather be anywhere else. Maestro Blackwood stopped when he saw Elena. His eyes narrowed. For a moment he just stared at her, as if trying to remember where he'd seen her before. Or maybe he was just annoyed that the cleaning woman hadn't made herself invisible yet. "You," he said, pointing at her with one long finger. "You're still here." Elena set down her mop and straightened up, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Yes, sir. I'm cleaning. I'll be out of your way in just a few minutes." He walked past her toward the piano, running his hand along the edge of the stage. The 2 students followed, whispering to each other. Elena caught the words scholarship and competition before their voices dropped too low to hear. She picked up her mop again, trying to work quietly in the corner. Maybe if she didn't draw attention to herself, they would forget she existed. It usually worked that way. Rich people had a talent for not seeing the help, but tonight Maestro Blackwood seemed to notice everything. She felt his eyes on her as she worked, tracking her movement across the floor. It made her skin prickle with discomfort. What did he want? Had she done something wrong? Was he going to complain about her to the management company? Then she made her mistake. She looked at the piano. Just for a second. Just one quick glance at those beautiful black and white keys that seemed to glow under the stage lights, but it was enough. "You were looking at the piano," Maestro Blackwood said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Elena's heart jumped into her throat. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just—" "You like piano?" He walked toward her slowly, a strange smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a cat who'd found a mouse to play with. Yes, sir. I think it's beautiful." Beautiful. He repeated the word like it tasted funny in his mouth. "Do you play?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena's fingers tightened around the mop handle. How should she answer? If she said no, he'd probably laugh and leave her alone. If she said yes, he'd want to know where and how and why a cleaning woman knew anything about piano. A little, she said quietly. When I was younger. A little. Maestro Blackwood turned to his students, that cat smile growing wider. Did you hear that? Our cleaning lady plays piano. A little. The students giggled. Not loud, cruel laughter, but the kind of soft, uncomfortable giggles that came from watching someone else get humiliated and being grateful it wasn't you. Well then, Maestro Blackwood said, gesturing toward the stage with a grand sweep of his arm. You must play for us. I insist. Elena's stomach dropped. Oh no, sir. I couldn't. I have to finish. The floors can wait. His voice had lost all pretense of friendliness now. It was a command, not an invitation. Play. Show us what you learned when you were younger. She wanted to refuse. Every part of her screamed to just say no, to grab her cleaning cart and leave. But Elena knew how the world worked. She knew that people like Maestro Blackwood were used to getting what they wanted. She knew that if she refused, if she embarrassed him in front of his students, she would lose this job, and she couldn't afford to lose this job. So she set down her mop. She wiped her wet hands on her uniform, leaving dark streaks on the cheap blue fabric. She walked toward the stage on legs that felt like they'd forgotten how to work properly. The students moved aside as she approached, pressing themselves against the wall like they were afraid poverty might be contagious. Elena climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The piano waited for her, massive and magnificent and utterly terrifying. She sat down on the bench. It was the first time she'd ever sat there. The leather was soft, expensive, maintained with the kind of care that only money could buy. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and suddenly she wasn't in the conservatory anymore. She was 8 years old, sitting at her teacher's piano in Bogota. She could smell the jasmine flowers that grew outside the window. She could hear Professor Reyes's gentle voice saying, "Music is not about the notes, little one. It's about the story you tell with them." Elena closed her eyes. She took a breath. And then she began to play. Elena's fingers touched the keys and something inside her broke open. Or maybe it was something that had been locked away for so long that she'd forgotten it existed. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the concert hall, soft at first, almost hesitant, like a question being asked in the dark. But then the music took over. Her hands knew what to do. They remembered every lesson, every hour of practice, every competition she'd played in back when she was a different person living a different life. The years melted away. She wasn't a tired cleaning woman anymore. She was 12 years old again, playing for an audience in Bogota, her mother crying happy tears in the front row, her teacher beaming with pride. The music grew louder, more confident. Her fingers flew across the keys, dancing through the complex passages like they'd been doing this every day instead of not touching a piano for 15 years. The melody soared and dipped, telling stories of love and loss, of dreams and heartbreak, of everything beautiful and terrible about being human. She forgot about Maestro Blackwood. She forgot about the students watching. She forgot about the mop and bucket waiting for her on the floor. There was only the music pouring out of her like water from a broken dam, unstoppable and pure and absolutely necessary. The acoustics in the hall were perfect. Every note rang clear and true, bouncing off the high ceilings and wrapping around the velvet seats like a living thing. This piano, this magnificent instrument, responded to her touch in ways the old broken piano she'd learned on never could. It was like the difference between speaking through a telephone and speaking face to face. Everything was richer, deeper, more real. Elena's eyes were closed, but tears leaked from beneath her lashes anyway. She was crying and didn't even know it, crying for the girl she used to be, the one who thought she'd spent her whole life playing music, crying for her father, who died before seeing her leave Colombia, crying for all the nights she'd fallen asleep with her fingers twitching, playing imaginary pianos in her dreams because she couldn't afford to touch a real one. The final notes came softly, gently, like a lullaby fading into silence. Elena held her hands above the keys for a moment, not ready to let go. Then she lowered them to her lap and opened her eyes. The silence in the hall was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Maestro Blackwood stood exactly where she'd left him, but his face had changed completely. The mocking smile was gone. His mouth hung open slightly and his eyes were wide, almost frightened. The two students looked like they'd been turned to stone. The girl's folder of sheet music had slipped from her hands and lay scattered on the floor, but she hadn't noticed. Elena stood up from the bench quickly, suddenly aware of what she'd just done. She'd let them see her. The real her. The her that she kept hidden under tired smiles and humble nods and yes sirs and no sirs. She felt naked, exposed, like she'd just walked into the room without clothes on. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Maestro Blackwood's voice came out hoarse, like he'd forgotten how to use it properly. Elena climbed down from the stage, her legs shaky. "In Colombia, sir. Before we came here. Colombia." He said it slowly, processing. "Who taught you?" "Professor Carmen Reyes. She was very kind to me." Something flickered across Maestro Blackwood's face. Recognition, maybe. "Carmen Reyes? The Carmen Reyes who trained with Claudio Arau?" Elena nodded. She was moving toward her mop now, desperate to put distance between herself and that piano. Between herself and this conversation. She needed to become invisible again. That's how you survived in this world when you had nothing. You stayed small. You stayed quiet. How long did you study? 8 years, sir. From when I was 4 until we left. And you performed? He was following her now, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor she'd just cleaned. Yes, sir. Competitions. Some concerts. Nothing important. That was a lie. They'd been very important. They'd been everything. But that life was dead now, buried under bills and responsibilities and the simple, crushing weight of survival. Why did you stop? Elena picked up her mop, squeezing the handle so hard her knuckles turned white. My family lost everything in the financial crisis. We had to leave. There was no money for piano lessons in America. No money for anything except rent and food. Barely enough for that. The female student finally bent down to gather her scattered sheet music, but Elena could feel the girl's eyes on her, reassessing, trying to make sense of this new information. The boy just stood there looking uncomfortable, like he'd witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see. Maestro Blackwood ran his hand through his hair, messing up the carefully styled silver strands. He looked like a man trying to solve a complicated math problem in his head. "This is extraordinary," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Absolutely extraordinary. Elena dipped her mop in the bucket, ready to finish her work and get out of there. "May I continue cleaning, sir? I have another job after this." "Another job?" He blinked at her. "How many jobs do you work?" "3, sir." "3?" He repeated it like he couldn't quite believe it. Like the concept of working 3 jobs was something from another planet. And maybe for him it was. People like Maestro Blackwood didn't know what it was like to choose between buying medicine for your mother or paying the electric bill. They didn't know about lying awake at night doing math in your head, trying to figure out how to stretch $12 across 4 days until the next paycheck. He stood there for another long moment, just staring at her. Then he turned abruptly to his students. "Come, we're leaving." The 2 students scrambled after him, throwing confused glances back at Elena as they left. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until finally, the heavy doors closed with a solid thunk. Elena was alone again. She stood there in the middle of the concert hall, mop in hand, trying to steady her breathing. What had she just done? She'd shown them too much. She'd revealed herself. That was dangerous. People like her couldn't afford to be noticed, to be remarkable. Remarkable meant complicated. Complicated meant risky. And risky meant losing the careful, fragile balance she'd built to keep her family afloat. She finished cleaning quickly, her movements jerky and anxious. She kept expecting Maestro Blackwood to come back, to ask more questions, to demand answers she didn't want to give. But he didn't return. The conservatory stayed quiet except for the swish of her mop and the occasional drip of water from her bucket. At 10:30, she locked up and pushed her cart to the storage closet. Her next job started at 11. The office building downtown. 4 floors of cubicles and conference rooms and bathrooms that always smelled like chemical air freshener, no matter how much she cleaned them. Elena caught a bus that took her across the city. She stared out the window at the lights sliding past, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Her hands still tingled from playing. Her heart still raced. She tried to push the feeling away, to forget the way the music had felt flowing through her, but it was like trying to forget how to breathe. When she got home at 3 in the morning, her brother was asleep on the couch, his textbook open on his chest. Her mother was in bed, her breathing rough and labored even in sleep. Elena changed into her pajamas and lay down on the small mattress they'd squeezed into the corner of the main room. She stared at the ceiling, at the water stain that looked like a bird, and wondered what Maestro Blackwood was doing right now. Was he asleep in whatever mansion he lived in? Or was he awake like her, thinking about what had happened? She'd never know. Tomorrow everything would go back to normal. She'd clean and scrub and mop, and he'd teach his wealthy students, and the world would keep spinning exactly the way it always had. That's what Elena told herself as she finally drifted off to sleep. But she was wrong. Nothing was going to be normal ever again. 3 days passed before Maestro Blackwood spoke to Elena again. 3 days where she jumped every time someone walked into her room. 3 days where she kept her head down even lower than usual, hoping maybe he'd forgotten about her completely. But on Thursday evening, as she was emptying trash cans in the administrative hallway, she heard that voice behind her. Elena. She turned around slowly. Maestro Blackwood stood there in his usual black suit, but something about him seemed different. Less arrogant, maybe, or perhaps just tired. Yes, sir? Come with me. I need to speak with you. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. He was going to fire her, or report her for something, or tell her she wasn't allowed to look at the piano anymore. She followed him down the corridor to his private office, a room she'd cleaned 100 times but never entered while he was there. The office was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood furniture, shelves crammed with books about music theory and composition, framed photographs of Maestro Blackwood shaking hands with famous musicians she recognized from her childhood. A large window overlooking the conservatory's courtyard. He gestured to a leather chair. Sit. Elena sat on the very edge of it, her hands clasped tight in her lap. She still wore her cleaning uniform, and suddenly felt very aware of the bleach stains on the knees, the frayed collar. Maestro Blackwood settled into his own chair behind the massive desk. He opened his laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was a video, grainy and old. A young girl sat at a piano on a stage decorated with Colombian flags. The girl wore a white dress with a blue sash. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Is this you? He asked. Elena's breath caught. She hadn't seen that video in years. Hadn't wanted to see it. Yes, sir. He pressed play. The young Elena on screen began to play Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata. The sound quality was terrible, but you could still hear the passion, the precision, the pure joy radiating from that little girl who believed the whole world was open to her. When the video ended, Maestro Blackwood closed the laptop. I found 12 videos of you performing. I found articles from Colombian newspapers calling you a prodigy. I found an interview with Professor Reyes where she said you were the most talented student she'd taught in 30 years. Elena said nothing. What could she say? Why are you cleaning floors? His voice wasn't mocking now. It was genuinely confused, almost angry. You should be performing, teaching, recording albums. Life doesn't always work out the way we plan, sir. That's not an answer. Elena took a breath. Do you know how much it costs to apply to music schools? To audition? Even if I got a scholarship, there are fees, books, housing. How would I pay for that? How would I support my family while I studied? My mother needs medication that costs $400 a month. My brother needs clothes and school supplies. Her landlord just raised the rent again. She heard her voice rising and forced it back down. Music is beautiful, sir, but it doesn't pay bills. It doesn't keep my mother alive. Maestro Blackwood leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. He was quiet for a long time. Elena waited, not sure if she was in trouble or not sure if she should leave or stay. Finally, he spoke. I have a student. His name is Sebastian Rothschild. You've probably seen him around, Elena had. Sebastian was impossible to miss. Tall, handsome, always surrounded by admirers. His family owned half the conservatory. Their name was literally on the building. Sebastian is preparing for the International Tchaikovsky competition. It's one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the world. If he wins or even places in the top 3, it will cement my reputation as a teacher. It will bring honor to this conservatory. He paused. But Sebastian has a problem. Sir? He plays like a machine. Technically perfect. Absolutely soulless. He's been raised with every advantage money can buy, and it shows in his music. There's no depth, no emotion, no story. Maestro Blackwood's eyes locked onto hers. He plays like someone who's never struggled for anything in his life. Because he hasn't. Elena wasn't sure where this was going, but she didn't like the direction. You, on the other hand, play like someone who has lived, who has lost, who has something to say. He leaned forward. I want to hire you to coach Sebastian, to teach him how to play with feeling. Elena blinked. I'm sorry, what? I'll pay you double what you make from all 3 of your cleaning jobs combined. You'll work with Sebastian 3 times a week, 2 hours per session. You'll listen to him play and help him find emotion in the music. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Why would Sebastian listen to me? I'm nobody. I have no credentials, no degree, he won't know who you are. You'll be introduced as a consultant from Europe, someone I've brought in specifically to work with elite students. He won't question it. He's too arrogant for that. Maestro Blackwood pulled out a contract from his desk drawer, already prepared. All you have to do is teach him to feel the music the way you do. That's all. Elena stared at the paper in front of her. The number on it made her dizzy. With that money, she could pay for her mother's medication for 6 months. She could buy her brother new shoes, new clothes. She could fix the leak in their bathroom that the landlord refused to repair. But something felt wrong about this. The secrecy, the lie about who she was. Why can't you just teach him yourself? Because I've been trying for 3 years and it's not working. He needs to learn from someone like you, someone who understands what music means when it's not just a hobby or a career move, but a lifeline. His voice softened slightly. I'm not a good man, Elena. I'm arrogant and demanding, and I care more about my reputation than I probably should. But I know talent when I see it, and I know that what you have is rare. Sebastian needs what you can teach him. Elena read through the contract. It was simple, straightforward. 6 weeks of coaching, payment delivered every week. Confidentiality agreement. She'd have to sign that she wouldn't reveal the arrangement to anyone. I need to think about it, she said. You have until tomorrow night. After that, I'll find someone else. He pulled the contract back. You can go now. Elena stood up, her legs unsteady. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Elena, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the other night. For humiliating you. That was cruel and unnecessary. She turned back. Maestro Blackwood wasn't looking at her. He was staring out the window at the darkening sky. Thank you, sir, she said quietly and left. That night, Elena lay awake on her thin mattress, listening to her mother's labored breathing from the other room. She thought about the money, about what it could do for her family. She thought about touching a piano regularly again, even if it was just to teach someone else. But she also thought about the lie, about pretending to be someone she wasn't, about helping a privileged boy succeed when she'd never been given the same chance. Her phone buzzed on the floor beside her. A text from the hospital where she cleaned. They were cutting her hours next month. Budget problems. Elena closed her eyes. She didn't really have a choice, did she? She never had. People like her didn't get choices. They got survival. They got whatever opportunities came their way, no matter how imperfect or uncomfortable. The next evening, she found Maestro Blackwood in his office and signed the contract. Good, he said, filing it away. You start Monday. Sebastian doesn't know you're coming. I'll introduce you myself. Remember, you're a consultant from Vienna. You've worked with competition winners before. Keep the details vague. Yes, sir. And Elena, don't let him push you around. Sebastian is used to getting his way. But for this to work, you need to be firm with him. Can you do that? Elena thought about all the things she'd survived. Leaving her country. Watching her father die. Working 3 jobs on 4 hours of sleep. Giving up her dreams so her family could eat. Yes, sir, she said. I can do that. But when Monday came and she walked into that rehearsal room to meet Sebastian Rothschild for the first time, she realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Sebastian looked at her like she was dirt on his expensive shoes. And when he sat down at the piano and began to play, Elena understood why Maestro Blackwood was so desperate. This was going to be impossible. Sebastian played like someone reading a grocery list. Every note was correct, perfectly timed, technically flawless, and completely empty. Elena sat in the corner of the rehearsal room, listening to him massacre Rachmaninoff, and felt her jaw tighten with each passing measure. When he finished, he spun around on the bench with a satisfied smile. Well, impressive, right? Elena chose her words carefully. You hit all the right notes. Exactly. He stood up, stretching like he'd just finished some light exercise. Maestro Blackwood said you'd help me polish a few things before the competition. But honestly, I don't see what needs polishing. I've been playing since I was 5. I've won every regional competition I've entered. Have you ever lost anything? Elena asked. Sebastian frowned. What kind of question is that? An important one. She stood and walked to the piano. Rachmaninoff wrote this piece during one of the darkest periods of his life. His first symphony had been destroyed by critics. He fell into a deep depression. He couldn't compose for years. This concerto was his way of clawing back to life. When you play it, we should feel that struggle, that pain, that triumph. It's just music, Sebastian said, shrugging. Notes on a page. Elena felt something snap inside her. Just music? Music is never just music. It's every human emotion condensed into sound. It's grief and joy and rage and hope all wrapped together. When you play without feeling, you might as well be a computer program. His face darkened. Who do you think you are? Some consultant from Vienna? I looked you up. There's no record of you anywhere. No performances. No competitions, nothing. Elena's heart stopped. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but not this soon. Not in the first session? Maestro Blackwood vouched for me, she said, keeping her voice steady. That should be enough. Maestro Blackwood is desperate for me to win. He'd bring in a trained monkey if he thought it would help. Sebastian grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. I don't need this. I don't need you. He stormed out, leaving Elena alone in the rehearsal room. She sank onto the piano bench and put her head in her hands. This was a disaster. She'd lasted exactly 45 minutes before completely failing at the one job that could save her family. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Doctor says I need new tests. Insurance won't cover. $800. Elena stared at the number until it blurred. $800. Money she didn't have. Money she wouldn't have unless this coaching arrangement worked. She found Maestro Blackwood in his office. Before she could speak, he held up a hand. I know. Sebastian just left here complaining about you. I'm sorry. I tried to... Don't apologize. He looked almost pleased. He said you told him he plays like a computer program. That's the first honest feedback anyone has given him in years. Everyone else is too afraid of his family to tell him the truth. He's not going to listen to me. He will, because I'm going to tell him that if he doesn't work with you, I won't coach him for the competition. His parents have already paid for the trip to Moscow, the entry fees, everything. He's not going to throw that away because his ego got bruised. Maestro Blackwood leaned back in his chair. Give it time. And don't go easy on him. That's exactly what he needs. Someone who doesn't care about his last name or his money. Elena wasn't sure about this, but she nodded. She needed this to work. She had no choice but to make it work. The next session was even worse. Sebastian showed up 20 minutes late and played with obvious contempt, rushing through pieces and making deliberate mistakes. Elena sat silently and let him throw his tantrum. When he finally stopped and glared at her, waiting for a reaction, she simply said, Are you finished? This is pointless. Then leave. But if you walk out that door, you're admitting you can't handle real criticism. You're admitting that you're not good enough to compete at an international level. His jaw clenched. I am good enough. Prove it. Play the Rachmaninoff again. But this time, play it like you actually care about something other than yourself. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Sebastian sat back down at the piano. He played. It was still mechanical, still emotionless, but Elena caught something. A flash of anger in the third movement. A hint of frustration in the way his fingers attacked the keys. It wasn't much, but it was something. Better, she said when he finished. At least you felt something that time, even if it was just anger at me. Despite himself, Sebastian almost smiled. Almost. The sessions continued. 3 times a week, 2 hours each time. Slowly, grudgingly, Sebastian started to listen. Not because he respected Elena, but because he couldn't stand the idea that she might be right about him. But Elena had her own secret. She started coming to the conservatory late at night after her other jobs. One of the maintenance workers, a kind man named David, had noticed her lingering near the rehearsal rooms and figured out what she wanted. He gave her a key card. Just between us, David said with a wink. The building should be used for music, not just collecting dust at night. So Elena played. For hours, she lost herself in the music she'd been denied for so long. She played Chopin and Beethoven and Mozart and Debussy, She played everything she'd ever loved, everything she'd dreamed about during those long years of cleaning floors and scrubbing toilets. Her fingers remembered it all. David would sometimes sit in the hallway and listen. One night, as she finished a particularly emotional piece, he knocked softly on the door. "That was beautiful," he said. "You should be on a stage somewhere, not teaching that spoiled kid." Elena smiled sadly. "Life doesn't work that way for people like us." "Maybe it could." David pulled out his phone. "I recorded some of your playing. Just for me, because it's so good. But I was thinking, what if more people heard it?" "David, no. I can't. If anyone finds out, just think about it." He left before she could argue further. But that night, lying on her mattress at home, Elena did think about it. She thought about the music sleeping inside her. She thought about spending the rest of her life teaching others to shine while she stayed in the shadows. The next week, Sebastian actually improved. Not a lot, but enough that Elena could hear glimpses of real emotion breaking through his technical perfection. In the middle of a particularly good run-through, he stopped playing and turned to her. "Why are you really here?" he asked. "And don't give me that Vienna consultant garbage. Nobody talks about music the way you do unless they've lived it." Elena hesitated. The truth sat on the edge of her tongue, dangerous and tempting. "I'm someone who used to dream the same dreams you have. I'm someone who lost her chance and doesn't want to see you waste yours." Sebastian studied her face. "You're better than me, aren't you? At playing?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "That must kill you," he said quietly. "Watching me fumble through pieces you could probably play in your sleep." "What kills me," Elena said, "is watching you fumble through them when you're perfectly capable of playing them beautifully. You have everything I lost. The least you could do is actually care about it." Something shifted in Sebastian's expression. Not quite respect, but maybe the beginning of understanding. He turned back to the piano and played the piece again. And this time, for just a moment, Elena heard something real. But while Sebastian was slowly learning to feel, David was making a choice that would change everything. He uploaded one of Elena's recordings to social media with a simple caption, "Hidden talent. Amazing pianist working as a janitor. Listen to this." The video started getting views, then shares, then thousands of shares. And one of those shares reached the desk of someone at the International Tchaikovsky competition. Someone who was looking for exactly the kind of story Elena represented. Someone who had the power to offer her a wildcard entry. The email arrived on Elena's phone 3 days later. She was mopping the conservatory hallway when it came through. She read it 3 times before her hands started shaking so badly she had to sit down on the floor. She'd been accepted. They wanted her to compete in Moscow in 6 weeks. The same competition Sebastian was entering. The same competition she'd just spent a month helping him prepare for. Elena looked down at the mop in her hand, then at the email on her phone. She thought about Maestro Blackwood's contract, about the confidentiality agreement she'd signed, about Sebastian finally starting to trust her. She thought about her mother's medical bills and her brother's future and all the reasons she'd agreed to this arrangement in the first place, and then she thought about the music, about the way it felt to play again, about the dream she'd buried but never quite killed. She had no idea what to do. Elena didn't tell anyone about the email. Not David, not her family, not Maestro Blackwood. She carried the secret like a stone in her pocket, heavy and sharp, cutting into her with every step. She continued coaching Sebastian. She continued cleaning floors. She continued pretending that her entire world hadn't just split in 2 directions, each one pulling her apart. But David noticed. He always noticed. "You got accepted, didn't you?" he said one night, finding her sitting alone in the rehearsal room staring at the piano without playing. Elena nodded slowly. "I can't go. Why not?" "Because I signed a contract. Because Maestro Blackwood trusted me. Because Sebastian is finally learning, and if I leave now, I'll ruin everything he's worked for." She pressed her hands against her eyes. "Because I can't afford the trip anyway. The email said they'd cover competition fees, but not travel or hotel or food. I'd need at least $3,000. I don't have $3,000. David sat down beside her. "What if you did?" "What?" "What if you had the money? Would you go then?" Elena dropped her hands. "It doesn't matter. I gave my word. Your word to lie about who you are? To hide your own talent so some rich kid can pretend he's special?" David pulled out his phone. The video I posted has 2 million views now. People are sharing it everywhere. They want to know who you are. They want to help. David, what did you do? I set up a fundraiser. People have been asking how they can support you. The money's already coming in. In 2 days, we've raised $4,000. Elena felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. You had no right. You should have asked me first. If I'd asked, you would have said no. You always say no to anything that might help you. He turned the phone toward her, showing her the fundraiser page. Comments scrolled past. Hundreds of them. Thousands. This woman deserves a chance. Finally, someone with real talent getting recognized. I donated. Good luck. Your story inspired me to start playing again. Elena's eyes burned with tears. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's people investing in something beautiful. In someone who represents what music should be. Raw talent. Real emotion. Not just privilege and expensive lessons. David stood up. You have 3 weeks before you need to decide. The competition is in 6 weeks. Think about it. Really think about it. He left her alone with her thoughts and the piano and the weight of an impossible choice. The next day, Maestro Blackwood called her into his office. Her heart hammered as she walked down the corridor. Had he found out? Had Sebastian told him about the video? But when she entered, his expression wasn't angry. It was complicated, troubled. Sit, he said. Elena sat. I saw the video. The one of you playing Chopin, the one that's gone viral. He turned his laptop toward her, showing David's post. 2.5 million views now. The comment section is full of people calling you a genius, calling you the next great pianist. Elena's mouth went dry. Sir, I can explain. The International Tchaikovsky competition contacted me this morning. They wanted to verify that you're who the video claims you are. They've offered you a wildcard entry. He leaned back in his chair. Of course, I told them it must be a mistake. That the woman in the video couldn't possibly be Elena Martinez, the cleaning woman I hired to secretly coach my star student. The sarcasm in his voice cut like a knife. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. For what? For being talented? For playing piano in your free time? For daring to have dreams even though you scrub toilets for a living? He rubbed his temples. I'm the one who should apologize. I put you in an impossible position. I asked you to hide yourself, to make yourself smaller so Sebastian could shine. That was wrong of me. Elena blinked back tears. What happens now? That depends on you. Maestro Blackwood pulled out the contract she'd signed and in front of her tore it in half. You're released from our agreement. You can take the competition entry. You can go to Moscow. You should go to Moscow. But Sebastian will be fine. He's learned more from you in 4 weeks than he learned from me in 3 years. Not just about piano, but about humility. About what music really means. He smiled slightly. You were right to be hard on him. He needed it. He's going to hate me when he finds out. Probably. For a while, anyway. Maestro Blackwood stood and looked out the window at the conservatory grounds. I've spent my whole career teaching wealthy children who had everything handed to them. I convinced myself I was shaping the future of classical music. But the truth is, I was just maintaining a system that keeps real talent locked out, unless it comes wrapped in money and connections. He turned back to her. You don't need my permission, Elena, but if it matters, you have my blessing. Go compete. Show them what real artistry looks like. Elena left his office in a daze. Everything she'd been so afraid of, so certain would destroy her, had somehow just freed her instead. That evening, she sat her mother and brother down at their tiny kitchen table. There's something I need to tell you, she said, and explained everything. The late night playing. The video. The fundraiser. The competition invitation, her mother cried. Her brother whooped and jumped up, nearly knocking over his chair. You have to go, her mother said, gripping Elena's hands. Mia, you have to go. This is what you were meant to do. But the money for your medication, I'll manage. We'll figure it out. We always do. Her mother's eyes were fierce despite the tears. I didn't raise you to play it safe. I raised you to be brave. So be brave. Elena used the fundraiser money for a plane ticket and a modest hotel room. She practiced every spare moment she had over the next 3 weeks, her fingers flying over the conservatory piano late into the night. David brought her coffee and sandwiches, making sure she ate. Sebastian found out 2 weeks before the competition. He showed up at the conservatory while she was practicing and stood in the doorway, watching her play. When she finished and turned around, his expression was unreadable. "You're really good," he said finally. "Thank you. I'm still angry at you. For lying. For not telling me? I know. I'm sorry." He walked closer, studying her face. "But I also understand now. What you tried to teach me. About feeling the music. About playing like it matters." He sat down on a nearby chair. "I watched your video 50 times. The way you play, it's like you're telling a story with every note. I've been trying to do that. To find my own story. Have you?" "I think so. It's not the same as yours. My struggles are different. Smaller, probably. But they're real to me." He looked at his hands. "My whole life, people have expected me to be perfect. To win everything. To never fail. That pressure, that weight of expectations, it's its own kind of prison. Maybe that's my story. Playing to be free from all that." Elena smiled. "That's a good story. Use it." They talked for another hour. Not as coach and student, but as two pianists preparing for the same challenge. When Sebastian left, he shook her hand. "Good luck in Moscow," he said. "You're going to be amazing. So are you." The competition was everything Elena had dreamed of and more terrifying than she'd imagined. The concert hall in Moscow was enormous, filled with hundreds of people and judges who had heard the world's best pianists. Backstage, musicians from 20 countries warmed up, their fingers dancing over practice keyboards. Elena waited in a borrowed black dress that David's sister had altered to fit her. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. She thought about her mother watching the live stream back home, about her brother telling everyone at school that his sister was competing in Moscow, about David, who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Sebastian performed before her. She watched from the wings as he walked onto that massive stage. He sat at the piano, took a breath, and began to play. He was good. Really good. The technical precision was still there, but now it was wrapped in genuine emotion. He played like someone who had finally found something to say, and Elena felt proud watching him. Then it was her turn. She walked onto the stage, and the lights were blinding. The piano waited for her like an old friend. She sat down, and suddenly everything else disappeared. The audience, the judges, the pressure. All of it faded away until there was only the music. She played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece she'd been coaching Sebastian on. But when Elena played it, she poured 15 years of longing into every measure. Every late night cleaning floors. Every time she'd walked past the conservatory and wondered what her life might have been. Every sacrifice her family had made. All of it flowed through her fingers and into the music. The audience was silent when she finished. For a moment, Elena panicked. Had she done something wrong? Then they stood, all of them. Hundreds of people rising to their feet, applauding, some of them crying. Elena didn't win first place. That went to an incredible pianist from Japan who had been training at elite conservatories since she was 3. Sebastian placed 7th, which was still impressive for someone so young. But Elena placed 3rd in an international competition. And more importantly, 5 different music schools approached her afterward with offers, full scholarships, teaching positions, opportunities to perform and record. Maestro Blackwood flew to Moscow for the finals. After the ceremony, he found Elena in the lobby of her hotel. "I owe you another apology," he said. "I saw your talent and tried to hide it. I tried to use it for my own purposes. That was selfish and cruel. You also gave me a chance when no one else would. You paid me when I needed money desperately. You let me play again." Elena smiled. "People are complicated. We can be selfish and kind at the same time." He nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" "I'm accepting the position at Grandview Conservatory. It's smaller than Rothschild, but they're letting me start a scholarship program for students who can't afford traditional lessons. Students like I used to be." "That's perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." 6 months later, Elena stood in front of her first class at Grandview. 12 students from all over the city, all of them talented, all of them from families who could never afford places like Rothschild Conservatory. Her mother's medication was covered by her new insurance. Her brother had a desk in their bigger apartment where he could do homework without cramping his shoulders. And Elena played piano every single day, teaching and performing and living the dream she'd thought was dead. One evening, David visited her at the conservatory, bringing coffee like he used to. "You did it," he said, watching her organize sheet music. "You actually did it." Elena looked around at the rehearsal room, at the piano waiting for her students, at the life she'd built from nothing but talent and stubbornness in one video that went viral. "We did it," she corrected. "None of this happens without you believing first." And then she sat down at the piano and played, because that's what she was meant to do all along. Not cleaning floors, not hiding in shadows, but making music that told the truth about struggle and hope and the kind of beauty that emerges when you refuse to give up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they seem.